Let's hit the high road. Let's hit the high road. It's the first touch, strong connection. It lays deep in your soul. Feel the kindness strongly coming. 'Cause you can achieve your goal. Let's hit the high road. Let's hit the high road.
Hi, it's Nancy Yeareld, and welcome to High Road to Humanity. I am so blessed today to have Jennifer Teske here, all the way from, are you still in Colorado?
I am, yeah. I've been here for 12 years. So,
Welcome to the High Road.
hi, thank you very much for having me.
I'm really happy you're here. You guys, her book is Become a Manifesting Machine. Check this out. Learn to use the law of attraction to embrace your goals, create success, and live the life of your dreams. And truly, I am so big. I am so happy you're here today. I want the audience to hear your story. And she's got a cool story and how this all came about. And I learned a lot from your book. So I'm really grateful that you wrote it and that you're here. Before we get into it, you guys, I just want to mention my book, Wake Up, the Universe is Speaking to You, is available at Amazon and at Barnes and Noble. My new book, coming out pretty soon. We're going to have pre-sales for, it's a guide to angel communication using spiritual law. So we're going to teach everybody how to connect with their guardian angel. And I also channel some messages in the book from Archangel Gabriel. So that will be really fun when it comes out for everyone to read. Messages for Humanity. Now, I do have my angel class going on right now. I'm offering the first chapter complimentary so that people can check it out. And then if you'd like to purchase, you can. It's a 3-parter, so you get the first part free. And then hopefully you'll want to move on. That's what most people have done, to go to the second and third parts. Also, I want to mention, a lot of times people want a reading, but they don't want to do a 30-minute reading with me. And I can do a 15-minute angel reading if you guys have a question about work or about love or about whatever, just about life. You're welcome to just go to my website, nancyyearout.com, just book your date and time, and I can do 15 minutes with you to answer any questions, to help you, guide you on your path. So I just want to say all of that. All right, Jennifer Teske's here. And let me tell you a little bit about Jen. Can I call you Jen? Is that cool?
Yeah, Jen is perfectly fine.
I don't know why I called you Jen, but all right. So Jen's a devoted wife and mother, and to her amazing husband, Scott, and she has an inquisitive, curious, strong-willed, mischievous daughter, Michaela. So writing is a passion that she tackles whenever she gets the chance. And when she's not working, writing, or hanging out with Scott or caring for Michaela, she enjoys hiking in the Colorado mountains and spending time with friends. She also loves cooking, ultimate frisbee, rock climbing, cozying up to the fire with a good book, and doing cross stitch, which I think is cool. Her website, you guys, is jenniferteske.com if you want to get in touch with her. Jen, I just want you to tell us your story, because, and I love this, how you started out. I'm just going to preface with that. You talk about meeting your 77-year-old self
Yes, I do.
in the beginning of this book, which I thought was really profound. So tell us your story and how this all came about.
How I met my 77-year-old self.
Sure.
I mean, the stories are it's actually funny. I've always been very creative, and I had just moved to New Jersey, and I lived by myself in a condo, and I was working from home, but I was working for a company that was based out of the UK. So I didn't know anybody, and I was still kind of getting used to the job and learning a bunch of new things. And it was a hot summer day, and I hadn't even had all of the furniture set up in my condo yet. So I was literally like working at a little card table, kind of against the wall, and I was looking out at my balcony, and I remember I was sending prospecting emails to customers, and like my eyes glazed over, because that's work that you can do for a little while, then you have to take a break.
Right.
And whenever I take a break, I always like get creative and start thinking about it with that, what can be silly things. But I looked up, and like, there was obviously never a woman out on my balcony, but I imagined that, you know, there was this woman out there in the hot sun, and she was like looking in and peeking at me, and she was shading her eyes and she was trying to see inside. And I just, you know, she was sort of my 77-year-old self. And for me, it was like she had come back 50 years to look at me, because at the time I was 27,
Yeah.
and to kind of see how I was doing, and to sort of like, you know, I don't know, maybe give me a kick in the butt if I needed one.
Right.
And that just sort of blossomed into this other story. I actually stopped work and I started journaling and kind of inventing her. And it made me think, like, you know, 50 years into the future, all things remaining equal, obviously you don't get sick and you don't, you know, pass away before that, but we're all going to get older, right?
Mm.
Time is going to pass no matter what.
Yeah.
And so I began to think to myself, like, am I going to be 77? And then am I going to like look back and have regrets? Or, you know, can I do things right the first time? And so it was this like path to between 27 and 77, you know, what is my life path going to look like? And that was really kind of the beginning of my understanding of the law of attraction and manifestation. But I had no idea that it was called manifestation or that it was called the law of attraction at the time. It was
Right.
literally just this idea that time was going to pass no matter what. One day I was going to be 77. And when I got there, would I have regrets? Like, or can I just live my life to the fullest? And
Yeah.
so it was fun. And I gave her, like, she was very quirky. She was wearing like hiking in the book. I describe it.
Yeah, you
She's
describe her.
yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And she's like, you know, hiking boots with loose laces. She had a long green skirt on, and she was carrying this green plaid umbrella, which that came about because my dad worked in Manhattan for over 50 years. He commuted on the train every day, and he had this like really tall green plaid umbrella with this wooden handle. And so I mean, that apparently just came into my mind. But I've been joking about it ever since, that when I turn 77, I'm going to buy myself an umbrella like that.
I
It's
love
just because
I
I think it'll be
I think
funny.
it's fantastic. Well, and you say in the book, you know, law of attraction cannot be proven scientifically, but I kind of made a note that energy flows where your attention goes, because
Mhm.
it truly does. And I wrote, and I'll just back up. I did a thing on affirmations, and in my book, because I started to realize, I'm just going to throw this in there. I was a single mom and I did affirmations to create business because I didn't had to. And
I
then
did too, actually, at
okay,
some
we'll
point.
talk about that. Yeah, because I mean, that's
Yeah.
how I realized it worked. You know what I mean? When did you realize, like, when did you go, okay, wait a minute, this stuff
Well,
works?
honestly, it was probably long before I created affirmations to get business, because
Okay,
after that point at 27, I just gotten out of a very long relationship.
right?
And so when I moved to New Jersey, I was completely by myself, and I was really like at a point of reinventing myself. So I was
Okay,
making new friends and developing a new social life. And that was when I really had to just make some pretty solid decisions about the direction that I wanted my life to go. But I don't think that I mean, I began to connect dots probably several years later, because there was just like sort of things that had happened that were interesting coincidences. And then when I looked back on them, I was like, well, that was weird. And my friend used to tease me and say that like I had special powers, because I would literally like declare something that I wanted,
yeah,
and then it would happen. And sometimes when it happened, I would just be like, what? And
you were,
so, and I
yeah,
I had this like level of surprise for quite a few years before I finally sat down and I was like, there's something to this. And as
right,
soon as I thought that there was something to it, that's when I began to research it. And that's when I like began to put words to it and understand that the law of attraction was a thing and manifestation was a thing. And then that's when I began to try to kind of ascertain the process around it. And that's really what the book ended up becoming.
yeah.
So it was an evolution of many, many years.
Right. What I love about this, I'm just going to tell you this. I'm going to do this. I just think this is cool. So on page 36, you guys got to get her book. But on page 36, she has a drawing. This really, I mean, I got to tell you something. This was cool because she's like, I'm not a cool artist, but you drew exactly where you wanted to be. And I like how you have an arrow going up. And I don't know if the audience can see that. Like
Yeah.
it's like you're upward, you know, and all the things that you wrote all came to pass.
They did. They really did. And literally, like, I think that was what was the date on that? 2012?
I'm going to look back here and see. Let's
Because it's
see.
on the drawing, I think.
Oh, it's on the drawing. Oh,
Yeah,
now
I
you,
thought so.
okay, let me see. I don't know, but it reminds me of a vision board because, oh, here, yes, it is. It's January 16th, 2012. And I wrote vision board because this goes along with what Oprah used to teach, because if you see it, but what really hit me with what you did here, though, I will say this. A lot of people, I always tell people, write your affirmations or write your visions down, and you actually drew it out,
Hmm.
which in my mind gives it power.
Well, I think, a drawing definitely, obviously images, an image speaks 1,000 words. It doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily have to be a drawing, though. It can be either or.
Yeah.
And speaking of vision boards, you can actually see probably in the background, you see a cross stitch in the background of my screen, but then you also see a vision board behind it. So
Yeah. Yeah. So you
I've
do
got
that.
that hanging.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to mention that I just thought that was really cool. And you were taking action, and I love this. So I wrote this from, you say, all around me were friends who had received financial help. This really hit home with me, and I wanted to share this with the audience. And this is from her book, you guys. All around me were friends who had received financial help, friends whose parents had paid for college, weddings, and the down payment on beautiful houses. No one in my family could do that. And you
Mhm.
know what? That resonates with me and with a lot of people because you had to make your own way and you had to figure it out. And kudos to you and to all the people who learn how to do this because if we were taught this is what I think when we were little kids. I mean, could you imagine?
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine like where you could be today if, because I wasn't taught any of it.
Right.
I mean,
Me
like
either.
yeah, none. And my parents are beautiful, right? I mean, they've been married for 57 years and they are an adorable couple and they're still together. And I
Yeah.
mean, no, and they're still doing well. My mom actually turned 78. When she turned 77 last year, I was all excited for her. I was like, you're meeting your 77-year-old self.
Oh
Didn't really know what I
no.
was talking about. But yeah, like they didn't know how to teach it to me because they never learned it themselves. And so it was just I was always somebody that loved to journal and it was just this inquisitive thing. And I mean, I don't teach it to my daughter quite yet because she's only 5. And so it's like she's still in, but everything is make believe for her now, which is actually really cool. And I want her to be able to carry some of that as she gets older, just to kind of the power of your imagination and the power of like visualizing what it is you want and believing that you can have it and that you're worthy of it. And I think that was the biggest thing that was difficult for me because I was never given any of that financial help. So believing that I was worthy of it and believing that I deserved the success that I wanted took me a really long time to actually be able to understand and wrap my mind around. So,
Yeah, well, you go through that in the book, which I think
yeah.
is fantastic. You guys, you talk about the nature of belief, where I think about faith, because I learned to have faith, and it's the same thing, believing in what you can't see. But what you say here is you started to recognize, like, how am I defining myself? And you write
Mhm.
in there, and you tell people affirmations to lift yourself back up, because I think a
Mhm.
lot of people self-talk, I guess is what I want to say, how you're
Yeah.
talking
Mhm.
about yourself. Yeah. You also talk about attempting to take action towards a desire, and failing is how we learn our limiting beliefs and how they reveal themselves. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, and I feel like limiting beliefs can probably reveal themselves in a number of ways. But what I had found is like some things I would, you talk about that image that was on the page from 2012. And then as you get further into the book, like I kind of evolve from that image into just sort of like schematic diagrams about things that you want versus, who you are now versus who you are becoming and
Mhm,
who you're choosing to grow into.
mhm,
And there would be desires that I had or things that I wanted to do. And when it came time to actually take action on them, I mean, I would almost feel like a physical resistance, like opposing sides of a magnet or, the same sides of a magnet. Like if you try to shove them together, that resistance, or if
mhm,
you're like walking upstream, it would, or something along those lines. I mean, it would feel like I would try to do something and emotionally it would be so uncomfortable for me to try to take action
mhm,
that I wouldn't be able to. And I really had to sit down and be like, why? Like what is happening here? And so when I would like think back on it or think back to why I wasn't actually taking action, then it ultimately would always kind of narrow itself down to some sort of core belief. And
mhm.
once I actually was able to shine light on that, there are many limiting beliefs that I would uncover. I was like, wow. I'm like, I believe that. And I believe that subconsciously, and that is shaping my choices in life. And as soon as you're able to sort of reveal them, that is when you're able to sort of take them, question them, formulate affirmations around them, and
Mhm.
begin to dissolve them and cultivate new beliefs. And
Mm.
so for me, I found because aligned action is always required for manifestations to happen. I mean, in certain cases, if you're attracting a gift or something like that, you can just have an idea in your mind, and then sometimes things will just appear. I've had manifestations like that happen, but there
Right.
are many where, like you being in real estate or me being in sales, you could proclaim and affirm what you wanted, but then there was work that you had to do in
Sure,
order for that
exactly.
to actually
Right.
happen. And
Yeah.
so there would be times for me in the process of doing that work that I would hit almost like this wall of resistance. And it would be very difficult for me to actually do the work. And that's when I'd be like, what's going on here? And I would be afraid. I would be afraid of success. It was almost like a fear of getting by it. And until I investigated the core of that fear, for me, it would always come back to a limiting belief. And then, like I've already said, once I understood that belief, then I was able to begin to kind of formulate new beliefs, which has made me grow exponentially. I mean,
Yeah.
I am barely recognizable to myself compared to who I was when I made that drawing in 2012. I mean, it's just a lot has happened in the
That's
interim, but
Well,
yeah.
but you worked on yourself and you recognized what was going on and you worked
Mhm.
with the universe. I call this working with the universal energy. It's that energy.
Yes.
And you also talk about, which I always say, the law of attraction never really talked about the emotion, the
Mhm.
feeling. Because for me, and I just want to say this, when I do an affirmation, you gotta feel it. I mean, you can say it. I mean, what do they say? Say it until you make it or whatever.
Yeah,
But
fake it
yeah,
until you make it.
yeah, but you really do have to feel like you've already received it and know that you
Mhm.
are worthy, and that is a huge thing. You know what this makes me think of, and I'll just bring it up. Have you ever done any tapping?
I have before, yes. From
Yeah,
trauma release exercises, I've
yeah,
absolutely been tapping.
yeah, and I want to talk about that if it's okay. So, is it all right if we talk about what happened with your husband and the
Yes.
PTSD? Because I think this is really important part of the book. I was like, what? I was like sitting on the edge of my seat reading this. So, you had all these affirmations and you decided you wanted to get married and you wanted to have kids. So you meet this guy, you get married in 2016, and tell the audience what happened.
Yeah, I mean, like, Pat Scott and I met in 2011, I think, about a year before I moved to Colorado. And we were dating for quite some time because we were both older. And, he was actually kind of funny. He was like a little reluctant to like put a label on our relationship at the beginning, blah, blah, blah. But the way that we met is super cute. And we got married in July of 2016. And 10 months after we got married, I traveled a lot for my job. And so he works as an arborist, and he started talking to me and complaining that he was having some weird, like, fluttering and issues with his heart. And he had had them for probably about 4 to 6 weeks. And for him to actually say something to me about it means that it was concerning to him. And it obviously concerned me. And I remember talking to my mother about it because my mom was a nurse before she retired. And I was joking around, but I was like, he's gonna die. And my mom is like, he is not. Stop talking about that. But I kid you not, like 10 months after we got married, he had a heart attack right in front of me in our bed. And it was at 5:17 in the morning that it started,
Mhm.
and he literally passed away right in front of me. And so I watched him kind of gasping for breath, and I didn't know it at the time, but it's called agonal breathing, and it's the last respiratory pattern that a person exhibits before they pass away when they're having a heart attack. And so that is what was happening to him. He was gasping for breath. His eyes were open, but they were glazed. He was not there.
Right.
And I was on the phone with 911 as all of this was happening, and he did it 4 times, and then he did it twice, and then nothing. And so, like, looking back on it now, I can say like the agonal breathing sounded very like I don't know, painful, like suffering. But when he passed away, it was very peaceful. It was interesting. But the person on the phone with me was like, you need to pull him off the bed. You need to perform CPR. So I like yanked his body off the bed. There was a little space in
No.
between our bed and the wall, and I had the phone on speakerphone. And I also, for some reason in the back of my mind, had the forethought that if the rescue team's going to come in, we need to go unlock our door. So I raced out, I unbolted our door, I left it open, I raced back.
Oh
And
my,
then I had learned CPR like 8 years earlier, 5 years
yeah, you
earlier.
say that. That's crazy, right?
And so, but I didn't remember the proper way to do it, but I remembered enough.
Mhm.
And I wasn't on his side like you're supposed to be, because I didn't fit. So I was actually like sort of straddling over him. One knee was on the bed, and I had found where you're supposed to give him CPR, and my arms were just locked, and I just kept saying to myself, keep your arms straight, because that's what I had been corrected on when I was learning
I
CPR.
know, I read that in the book and I was like, oh my God, she's checking out her corrections that she did.
Well, because I wanted to make sure I was doing it right. And
Yeah.
so I sat there and I gave him CPR for about 8 minutes. And then the rescue team walked in and I was pulled. We had a 2-bedroom condo at the time. So I was pulled into my office essentially across the hall. And I didn't know this until probably the next day. But he was deceased for 20 minutes. So they had, or maybe it was 24. I don't exactly
24, I
remember.
think you said, yeah, in the book, because I thought that was really a long time for somebody to be gone. And they
Yeah. And
revived him. Yeah.
well, and it actually resulted in a change in the protocol of the rescue teams in the area here, because they had within their protocol to only work on somebody for 20 minutes. So they were working on him, and then they were on the phone. They were still giving him CPR, but they were on the phone with the coroner to pronounce time of death. And as they were working on him, his alarm had started to go off, because his alarm goes off at 20 minutes to 6 every morning. Starts really small and it gets really, 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 really loud. And at one point, one of the rescue guys was like, "Who's beep bleep alarm is that?" And as soon as he said that, Scott took a breath.
Oh
And
my
so
God.
after being out for 24 minutes, like all the guys looked at him, and they looked at him, they looked at each other, they were like, he just took a breath. And
Oh,
so they all started working on him again. When they wheeled him out of the condo, his heart was beating on its own. I believe they said that it was touch and go when he was on his way to the hospital, and then he was in a coma for 2 days. They had to perform emergency heart surgery and give him a stent. And then, so they kept him in a coma for 48 hours. And then he woke up 2 days later. And it's actually interesting because the heart attack happened on June 2nd, and the day that he woke up was June 4th. So today that you
dang.
and I talk is like the anniversary of Wake Up Day, because that happened 7 years ago. And so like June 4th is a special day for us now, right? But yeah, I mean, he woke up, and when in that 2-day interim, they were not pulling any punches with me. They were not promising that he was going to wake up and be okay, because when people have this, they have seen patients make a full recovery and walk out of the hospital, and then they've seen patients wake up and be vegetables. So they just don't know, because anytime you're without oxygen in your
For
brain for
that
3
long.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, even for 3 minutes is really all it takes for brain death to start to occur. But I think the whole thing was just super miraculous, because I was there when it started, immediately when it started, and then I performed CPR right away. So the only thing that we can think of is that he had enough residual oxygen in his blood, and I was pumping his blood enough that it kept the oxygen in his brain, because he woke up, and I mean, he was a little confused at first. Like, he thought he still lived in New Jersey. He thought that the year was 2012 when it was 2017, but the hospital people said all of that was normal. And then he was in the hospital for 10 days, and he came home, and he had to he had to take it easy for 3 months, but then he was back to work, and it was just like it had never happened. And then I had a whole bunch of emotional trauma to work through
I know. Well,
afterwards.
before we get into that, I have to ask you, do you believe this was divine intervention? Are you religious? Do you believe that God came in and saved him? What do you,
Um,
I just want to
yeah,
know.
like,
I
'cause
felt
I was
that
like,
way. I was like, well, this was a miracle.
oh, absolutely. I mean, like, it was not his time. It was
No.
obviously not his time,
And it was
because
for you. And I don't mean to interrupt you, but it was for you. It
well,
was.
actually, I agree with you in that too, because we can talk about the trauma recovery, but everything that happened after that was a significant factor in my growth as well, right? So it was a trial for him, but it was I almost, and I don't want to make it about me because it happened to him,
Yeah.
but he doesn't have
But
any memory of it. You know, I mean, he didn't feel good the night before, and then the next thing he knows, he's waking up in the hospital. And so he has no memory of the event at all. So he wasn't really traumatized by it. Like, people describe the pain of what a heart attack feels like when they're awake for it, but he wasn't awake for any of it. So he didn't feel any of that. So he didn't have any trauma associated with it. And the
You
week
did.
before that, well, the week before that, I had been traveling all week. So if this had happened the week before that, I would have come home and I would have found him passed away if I hadn't been there. And also the divine intervention piece, Nancy, I mean, I woke up at 3 minutes before it started. I woke up.
Right. I want
And
to say that too. I want to bring
yeah,
that to the audience attention because in the book, and I have to say this, well, I don't know if I can find the page, but it was like 4:15 you wake up and then 4:17 or something like that. He has the heart attack. It was
yeah,
like,
and so
it
it
was
was
like
fine. Yeah,
minutes.
it was weird. It was like 5:14. I woke up and I mean, I was awake, and I am not a morning person.
Right. You
So
say that. You say that in the book. You were like, you woke up and you were like wide awake in the morning.
yes, I was wide awake, I was alert, and I sat up and I took a drink of water, and then I was not facing him. Like, I turned away from him and I was trying to be quiet because, like I said, his alarm always goes off at 20 minutes to 6. So when I saw what time it was, whenever he wakes up early, he always gets grumpy if he wakes up before the alarm. So I
Yeah.
was trying to be really quiet, but literally, like, I mean, 3 minutes before the whole thing started, I was awake and I was wide awake. And so I was awake, I was alert, I was, you know, and ready to act. I wasn't disoriented. You know how sometimes when you first wake up in the
Yeah.
morning,
Yeah.
you're disoriented, you don't know what's going on. But nope, I mean, fully alert and awake. So it was like alert and awake. So, you know, I mean, like some force
It was
woke
a
me up,
plan. It
said,
was a
hey, you're
plan.
about to get real. You better be awake. And
God,
there it was.
wow. Well, let's just get to this part of it. So, in the book, you guys, and I want to say this, she's got some really cool affirmations. I have some questions about your affirmations, but you do have affirmations and talk about PTSD. So, for people who have PTSD and are looking for some affirmations, this is a really good book. I wanted to understand something in your book, and I'm going to go to page 86 because that's where it is. And I want to understand your affirmations because some of these affirmations you say, why am I? And then you say you are. So I
Mhm.
don't understand. Like you say, I am grateful for my life. You are grateful for your life. I am focused on writing my book. You are focused on writing your book. Why are you doing that? I don't understand. Explain that to the audience and me because I don't get it.
No, and that's fine. That was something that I stole that from Louise Hay because I
Right.
had,
But I didn't get
and
it.
I'll no, I'll get to it. It's actually interesting. Part of it is because I like language, so it's very interesting to me. But after, like, when I moved to New Jersey, you know, prior to that, I had just gotten out of that long relationship, and I had my self-esteem had to go through a whole lot of healing. And so I found one of her self-esteem affirmation audiobooks where she did that. And the description was like, when you say I am strong, or I am, you know, a powerful seller or something like that, like, it's, you're saying it to yourself, but you can also sort of feel like it's a bit of a lie, like you can kind of be duping
Right.
yourself. But
Right.
that subtle change in language to repeating that affirmation with a second person present tense where you're saying you are, it comes across as a command. And so it's very subtle, but it's more difficult for you to say that it's a lie because it's like somebody else is saying that about you. And having somebody else say that about you, it just like settles in. So you can say, like, you know, I mean, I opened to that page too, like, I trust in my creative process. And maybe I do, maybe I don't. But then somebody else says, like, you trust in your creative process. And it's like, oh, and it is
You
very
know what?
subtle.
You're right. You're right. You're absolutely right.
And it's not something that is like super significant, but it's just something that if you have any doubts about that affirmation, it's just like you and I having a conversation right now, right? I mean, like, we're always more kind and generous to our friends than we are to ourselves.
I
You know, if
know.
somebody's having a hard time, we'll be like, you're amazing, what are you talking about, right? But the person who's having a hard time may not be able to see it. And so, you know, when you say it yourself, that's one thing. But then when you repeat it in that second person present tense, it just kind of like hits home a little bit more. It's just a little bit stronger.
It
And
really does.
yeah, and it's and what I found, and the reason why I believe it so much is like, once I had um, listened to that self-esteem affirmation from Louise Hay, it really, I mean, it significantly worked. Like, she would say something in the first person present tense, and then as soon as it was repeated in the second person present tense, I would find myself crying, because like as soon as somebody else said it to me, and somebody else gave me permission to feel, or somebody else gave me permission to realize that, everything was okay, it was just like, it was this release of emotion. And so I just found that so powerful back when I was healing from my relationship, that I was thinking, why can't we apply this to the affirmations that we create ourselves? And so, I definitely adopted the technique, and just then changed the affirmations in that capacity. And everybody's affirmations are going to be somewhat different, because everybody's
Right.
life goals are going to be
Different.
different. Right?
Yeah, this is amazing. Thank you for this, because
Awesome.
I followed Louise Hay for a long time, and I have a lot of her books, but I never caught this. And I agree with you. It's the language. And I mentioned tapping, and I think that's part of it too. It's it's reprogramming. We're reprogramming ourselves.
Well,
Is
we
what we're doing.
absolutely are. I mean, I'm the mother of a 5-year-old right now. And so I'm also reading books on parenting. And one of the books I'm reading talks about, um, how we are all hardwired, how our circuitry is hardwired when we are children based on how we were raised. So I'm very aware of that. And like, how am I hardwiring my child right now? Right. And I'm not trying to control all aspects of it, because you can't when you're a parent. But then it makes you question how you were hardwired. And so it absolutely is reprogramming, because you have these subconscious beliefs that you inherited, that
Mm.
you had no part in forming, and it was
Right.
based on your environment. And then as you get older, you do have choice, and you can begin to question them, and then you can begin to reprogram them. And so tapping helps that, because you do releasing. Affirmation helps that. Any way that you can sort of release emotions, give yourself permission to feel, it's all about reprogramming. You can change every aspect of who you are, because what happened to you in your past doesn't have to matter. It only matters as much as you allow it to matter.
Yeah, and I think it's wonderful for you to bring it to the forefront. A lot of people are starting to realize this. It's interesting. Once you start to realize this and you run into somebody who hasn't, you recognize the patterns in other people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really crazy. And you realize how people talk about themselves, and you're right when you say we think so much of other people, but less of ourselves. And how did we get like that? It's so weird that
Yeah,
we,
and I mean, and I think it's changing now a
it
little bit. I think
is. Yeah.
social media has helped that, because there's been, and it's more like of an open discussion too.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it wasn't talked about when we were children, right?
Right.
And so, parenting, it was just a lot of it became, well, this is how I was raised, so this is how I'm going to raise you. And that just kind of passed down generation to generation to generation. And it's, that our parenting patterns, there's just a little bit more awareness around it, I think. We still have a long way to go, but because there's more awareness around it, that we're just beginning to see the shift. And I think it's a wonderful thing.
It really is. I want to go back to the PTSD, because you do have a section in here, and I mentioned it, where you talk about permission. And I wondered if you talk about that a little bit. Because I
Well,
think, did that help you get over your PTSD, I guess, is what I
yeah,
want.
I mean, I think like before I even got to the point where I was allowing, giving, you have to give yourself permission to heal. And you also have to decide that you want to heal. But, I mean, I want to be very careful when I talk about PTSD, because that is such a personal experience for every single person. And there
Mhm.
are varying levels of it and varying reasons that cause it. I mean, there's military PTSD, and then there's like PTSD that we can all suffer from. There's significant PTSD, there's like little kind of minor traumas. So I don't want to blanket all of this and say that this is like the absolute way to cure PTSD, because everybody's experience is so nuanced and so different.
Mhm.
But for me, after Scott's heart attack, I was beginning to have panic attacks and anxiety and flashbacks around the whole event. It was affecting my sleep, it was affecting my work. I wasn't pregnant at the time, so fortunately, like, I wasn't a parent, but it was affecting my life. Like, I
Right.
mean, the level of anxiety was so piercing that it was just difficult to be around other people. And even anxiety is very nuanced among people. So, I mean, I'm not going to blanket that either. But I remember waking up one morning after having a pretty serious round of anxiety and just being like, this has to stop. Be like, like I am, and part of it was because I was in the process of writing this book, and I was in the process of like understanding manifestation and the law of attraction. And part of me sat down and said, if I am, going through this, part of the reason I'm going through this is because I'm allowing it to happen. Like there's a part of me that is allowing this. And if I no longer want to allow this, like this has to stop. Like I made a decision saying that this had to stop. I made a decision saying that I was going to find a way out, even though I didn't know how.
Yeah.
And as soon as I had made that decision, that's when, like that's when I discovered EMDR, which is a very significant and powerful way to actually help people who have PTSD. And I worked with my therapist, but it was like inside of therapy and then also outside of therapy, giving myself permission to feel all of the ugly feelings. Because when the traumatic situation happens,
Yeah.
and I think this may be something that is similar to many traumatic situations, is when you're in the thick of it, you do not have time to feel. You have to act, right? And if it's like you are either acting sort of from in a survival sense, really, for all of us, and it could be emotional survival, it could be physical survival, but you're not sitting here saying, oh no, I'm scared, I'm not going to do anything. You are acting instinctively in that situation because everything happens, it's happening so fast.
Right.
And then it's only afterwards, when you're in a situation where you're kind of safe again, that your emotions that like, because though all of those emotions happen to you at the same time that the actual event happens to you, but they automatically get bottled up because you don't have time to process them. They'll get in the way. And so you're just acting on instinct. And then when you're in that safe place, then all of those emotions kind of creep out of hiding.
Yeah.
And then they hit you. And then you're like, whoa. And so even though you're safe, all of the emotions from that situation are still very alive and well inside your mind. And so that is what you are
In your
processing.
body. I have to say
Yeah. I mean, I
because
say
we're-
mind, but actually I mean your body.
yeah,
Yes.
because they're like they're in your cells because our emotions are in
Absolutely. I
cells.
mean, you're
Yeah.
like your cells, your body, and your body and your mind store
Yeah.
trauma. I mean,
Yeah.
and all of the tension in your cells, and like, and you'll find, because I found as I was, healing from it, it happened in layers. And so it
Okay.
wasn't something that was like all of a sudden I was healed from PTSD. It would be like, no, a major layer would lift and I would think, okay, I'm okay. And then something else would happen and be like, well, maybe I'm not okay. And then like another layer.
Wow.
So it was like layers of an onion that slowly peeled back. And then there were times when even after like the main trauma of Scott's heart attack, the majority of that had subsided, that I began to sort of investigate my own childhood. And there was a time where I was having a conversation with my mom, and we were addressing something that I remembered as very traumatic that she didn't quite remember, but I was able to talk to her about it. And I mentioned it in the book, but like my entire pelvis area just started trembling and I could feel it, and you could hear it in my voice and I could feel it in my body that I was shaking as I was talking to her. And at the end, I was almost in tears, but I wasn't. And at the end of the conversation, I like my entire body just felt lighter.
Because you
It was,
released it. You released that
yes,
energy, that negative
yes,
energy that gets stuck.
yes.
Oh,
And it was fascinating because like it improved the relationship with my mom, and
yeah.
that is also what convinced me that that trauma is absolutely stored in our cells, because it really truly is.
Yeah.
And there are different exercises that you can do to kind of support and help release trauma, sort of as things that you can do in addition to therapies like EMDR and other therapies, and tapping, right? I mean, everybody's healing journey from PTSD is going to look a little bit different based on the trauma that they have experienced. And for some people, it's like if you have to dive into those feelings, like it can be really, really painful and really, really scary. And depending on the nature of the trauma, some people can't touch it. It is the nature of the beast, unfortunately. But for my experience, like I was just like, okay, here's the trauma C. I'm going to just jump right in because I'm really tired of anxiety and I'm really tired of panic attacks, and I want to figure it out. And then as soon as I made myself sort of an experiment, and I was able to kind of separate from it, and as things slowly got better, I was also able to document a lot of it. And it was really fascinating because it ties into manifestation and it ties into the law of attraction. Because when you're able to release those emotional blocks, whether they come from something like PTSD or whether they come from your childhood programming that influences your subconscious beliefs, once you're able to explore them and release the emotions around them, then whatever sort of walls of resistance you have up, they're able to dissolve. And
Right.
once they're able to dissolve, then you are able to bring in more abundance for yourself, as you know, if you can have those different layers of resistance dissolve and go away. So it's a fascinating process. I mean, a
It
lot of people
really
call it
is. It
work,
really is. Well,
but
oh, well, I want to ask you this. It's really interesting. And what I'm picking up, of course, like I hope the audience is too, a lot of people stay stuck in that and don't want to face their fear. It's really facing your fears. And
it is.
it really
And
is facing it. It's like bringing up the emotion. You don't want to feel the emotion, so you just don't feel it. You become
and in
numb or
some
go ahead. I'm
well,
sorry.
I'm just like in some cases it can be because you don't want to feel it, and in other
Yeah.
cases though it could be that you don't even know that it's there because
Oh,
it's below the surface.
okay.
Because with Scott's heart attack was so traumatic that I had no choice but to deal with that. But if
Mm,
that had never happened, a lot of the things that I was no longer afraid to dive into feeling those feelings around my childhood after the heart attack because I had survived all of that emotional healing, that
mm,
I was like, well, let's just go in and explore all of these other things. But if the heart attack had never happened, I would have never even known to go in search of that stuff.
right.
Right. And
Right.
so, on the one hand, you're absolutely right when you say that some people don't want to do the shadow work because it's hard work. But
Mhm.
on the other hand, it also could be that you don't know what you don't know. And so we can be walking around on this life trajectory based on these subconscious beliefs, and we don't even know that we have them.
Right. I just think it's really important, and I'll just give you my 2 cents on that one, and we probably gotta get out of here soon. This has been a really
Yeah.
great conversation, and you really helped a lot of people by coming on the show today, so I just wanna thank you,
Thank
Jennifer,
you.
and for writing the book. I wanna say that, yeah, traumatic things happen, and I feel the same way. A lot of times the trauma catapults us to work on ourselves, and you're
Mhm.
correct. I wouldn't have worked on myself if I wouldn't have had something traumatic happen, and then you think, okay, wait a minute, I've got to work on myself because nobody's going to fix this for me. And it takes a lot for people to work on themselves. It takes a lot of courage, and you got to look at different things, and you can't play the blame game. You can't blame the parents and all of that, you
Yeah,
know.
my husband calls them blame grenades, which I think is
Yeah.
funny.
What I've really learned from having you on and having a lot of different guests on and interviewing them is it is really important that everybody work on their inner child, work on different programming that happened when they were younger. Nobody's life is perfect. And when we work on that, what I've learned from talking to people like you and interviewing is that it raises our vibration. And
Yeah, I would agree with that. Even though in
yeah,
the book I kind of like poo-poo vibration a little bit because of where I was at the time that I wrote it. It was kind of funny. But no, I agree with that though, because it just
yeah,
like brings you to another, it frees you, right? And so
yeah, it changes everything.
in that sense, it raises your vibration because like the things that you were holding on to when you're able to let them go, it's just you're able to shift your perspective. And when you can
Yeah.
shift your perspective, it's remarkable what can
Oh,
happen.
trust me, Jennifer. I was the first person. I used to laugh at people when they said they were working on their inner child. I was like, oh, ha, ha, ha. And then here I did it myself and realized, oh my God, it's the most freeing thing. And like I said, I've interviewed so many people, and it feels like, and I think that's what we're all here to do. And I think that was part of when we had COVID and had all that stuff that people went in and or stuck at home and they had to maybe go in and work on themselves. And I
A
think that
little bit.
yeah, I think that really helped things. Well, let me ask you this. So here you are today. You've got this fabulous book. Is there a couple affirmations you want to leave us with today, or what's a good one
Oh
for
my
today that
goodness.
we could?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because I heard you ask that on another podcast, and and I feel like the affirmations are so personal, right? Because you can sit there and say like I am powerful and abundance comes to me and things like that, but I really feel like it all depends on what's going on in your own life, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Because sometimes you can have like generic affirmations like that, and they may not feel genuine to you. So at the moment, I mean, kind of in a position where like I'm working on some different books and I'm not actually focusing on affirmations. So I don't really have one that I can
Oh
kind of
my
leave you
gosh.
guys with. And I'm
Well,
sorry about that,
no,
but
don't be sorry. I'll give you one of mine. I'm healthy, wealthy, and wise, and I have sparkling blue eyes. There you go.
I should give that to my daughter because she's got sparkling blue eyes.
There you go. Or you could,
Wealthy and wise.
yeah, I like the ones that rhyme because then people remember them,
Yeah.
But I'm healthy, wealthy, and wise is a good one. So, what are you working on now?
So I'm actually currently working on a children's book, which is a
I
little
love
bit
it.
different.
Oh, cool. All right.
And it's not related to this, but it's because my daughter's starting kindergarten this year. So I wrote a book in rhyme for her called Onward to Kindergarten.
Oh, I love.
And it's all about leaving preschool and going to kindergarten, and I'm in the middle of having that illustrated. I'm also working on a book on procrastination, believe it or not, because that's interesting to me. Like that kind of ties into blocks, and I have notes for another manifestation book. And the working title is like Becoming a Manifestation Master or Becoming a Manifesting Master, because this book touched so much on the trauma aspect of it, right? It didn't touch as much on the energetic aspect. And there's so much more to that that I
Right.
feel like there's a lot more depth and dimension that you can go in, that I've continued to learn. Basically, like I wrote this book to learn, but then my learning has continued, and
Right.
the topic still absolutely fascinates me. So
Yeah.
I've got notes for that, and at the moment though, the children's book is my first priority because she starts kindergarten in August. So if I could finish that soon, that would be excellent. And then eventually in the future, I may, either develop a manifestation course or something along those lines. Like that's always been in the back of my mind. I mentioned in the first part of this book that I didn't, I wasn't advertising a course, because sometimes I see that in books. Like I see people write that they're advertising something else that they can get. And I just wanted the book to be a standalone, something that people could read and enjoy. And I didn't want to feel like they thought that I was selling them on something else. But as I've learned more about this, and as I've realized how many people can benefit from it,
Right.
that is an avenue I would eventually like to go in when I can get there, right? So
I,
it's kind of,
and I can relate to you. I felt that way too about, well, I want everyone to know how to connect to the divine, to the
yeah,
source, and I want everyone to know how to connect to the earth, and I want everyone to know how to connect to their guardian angel because we all have one. So it gets to a point where you're like, okay, I've talked about it, but now I got to teach it because
yeah.
it's that important. So I
And
get you.
I agree with you that it is important. I mean, like, I've had an angel reading before, and I don't know that much about all of that, but like, I mean, I understand about the guardian angel, but being in touch with source, like when you can walk around with sort of a level of deep gratitude for the things that you have, like
Yeah.
it brings you this sense of calm that is just so, I don't know, it's almost like a high, because it's so like you just you're not walking around in that like tense state all the time. You're just sort of really able to be present with what's
Chill. Yeah.
around you. And it's just, I mean, it's really life enriching. It's life affirming, but it's also life enriching. And so yeah, I mean, I think if more people can benefit from that, it helps you to navigate the storms, because the storms are still coming, right? I mean, like that's life. We're facing challenges. We all are going to continue to face challenges. And so if you can sort of approach the challenges with a different perspective, it doesn't mean that they may not be any less hard, but you know that you'll get to the other side of them. And so
Yeah, yeah. I think, and I don't know. Yeah, you have a different attitude. I think your whole attitude changes.
it does.
Yeah,
And it changes, and it can change for the better. And it's just, and it's very healthy.
yeah,
So
I think so too. Well, Jennifer Teske, we're going to get out of here for today. You guys, her website is jenniferteske.com. The book is Become a Manifesting Machine. I love this. You learn to use the law of attraction. Thank you so much for coming on today.
thank you. I appreciate it. Everybody enjoy their day.
Yes. All right, you guys, we're getting out of here for today. If you want to get an angel reading, or if you want to pick up one of my books, go to nancyyearout.com. I hope everybody has a fabulous week, and God bless.
Hold your head high, the world is coming. Watch the colors lift your soul. Connect the dots and keep the motion. Let's hit the high road.